Well, thanks again for doing this, Jan. I really appreciate
Yeah.
you sitting for this interview. And
He's going to tell me what to say.
I'll ask you some questions, and
Good. Okay.
you can just respond as you will. Yeah, and this we'll just keep this rolling. And
I have the map.
okay. Well, I wanted to ask you a couple questions just about before getting into your childhood. I wanted to ask you a couple questions, if I could, about your parents. It seemed, and particularly, I wanted to first ask you about your mother, and it seems like you had a whole set of really fascinating sort of women in your family and in your, and in your early life. And I was wondering if
Yes.
you could
Well,
tell.
when we go next door, I'll show you upstairs. My mother was the first woman president of a law school class in this country.
And that was, which law school was that?
That was Northeastern Law School. And her professors ultimately migrated to Harvard. So by the time I got to college, her Northeastern professors had become Harvard professors, and one of my Harvard boyfriends used to come to visit me, and so we all kind of bunched together there. So it was very funny because every once in a while I'll go onto the net and look up someone to see what happened to them.
Yeah.
Of course now everybody's gone, like, but I used to do it a lot, and so they would come and wait for me to get properly dressed and talk to my mother, the professors from Northeastern. So I think that she never made a big deal out of it. I didn't find out about it until I found this newspaper article, and many years later up here had it framed because it was kind of fun. My father's father committed suicide 6 months before his bar mitzvah.
Oh my gosh.
So he became the head of a family. He had 3 younger sisters. And somehow, I don't know how, because the sisters would always say, he enjoyed riding his bicycle and stuff like that. I still don't understand how things fitted together. But he was like one of these very stable people.
Mm-hmm.
So he built my first dollhouse. Okay. And he took me a lot of places. And my mother was a person who liked to get away in the winter for just a short amount of time. So we traipsed off to Florida. Do you know Winter Park?
No, I don't.
Well, it's the next town to Orlando,
Okay.
but it's no longer like it. Okay. And I don't know whether you've heard of Rollins College.
I haven't. I'm
Rollins
sorry.
College is there, and it's beautiful pink stucco and stuff. And so every morning we used to go out walking, and it was a very beautiful place. And then finally, one year, we decided to stay a longer time, and I was enrolled in the 3rd grade.
For part of the year?
Several months.
Okay.
Basically for it was almost the whole 3rd grade. Because when I got back, I knew what they were doing. And I found the temperament very different, but I had to pay attention, and they took the school class on a train ride from Orlando to Winter Park, just so the kids could get used to what a train was.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was an exciting time, and I remember making friends with a boy there, Edward Kane Jr., and we stayed in a place called the Self House, but it was just because the woman's name was Self.
Okay.
You understand that, and it was very beautifully done. The dining room was lovely, everything, and I met this boy there. And we found that the house was an old-fashioned house, so they had a lot of bathrooms throughout the house, but they didn't have any standard locks on them. They had keys. So we went around and swiped all the keys and exchanged them for any bathroom at all.
Okay.
So people would come down in the morning and rave at the management. And we had a very, very good visit. Across the street from this house was the train station. And in the afternoon, people from the town would just go over and wait for the train and wave at the people in the windows because they would stop for a few minutes.
This was the entertainment.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, could you tell us a little bit more about the sort of work that your father did and your mother did?
Yes. My father was a lawyer. He was also very involved in community activities. So in the town of Chelsea, where we lived, he was the head of the Young Men's Hebrew Association and also head of the vice head of the Young Men's Christian Association, and ran the Red Feather Drive.
I don't know what the Red Feather Drive
It
is.
was the community chest. It was
Okay.
whatever we call it now. Yeah. And he was a very sociable person, good looking, and he taught me a lot. Like he taught me to do arithmetic in my head, not on paper, and he was just full of stuff that you learned from, and I got him to make things. He started with the dollhouse. And then one year, when my mother and I went down, the house next door to the Self House had a traveling exhibit from Berea, Kentucky. And Berea had a school, but it also had a commercial side. And this particular exhibit in this next door house was an example of weaving. It was not pure. And so I won't make a case for its purity, but I learned exactly how things worked. But one thing that was non-standard for a strict hand weaving thing was the ability to pull the bar back after each shot. And what they did there was they had a mechanism. So they yanked something and the shuttle flew across the loom.
Okay.
And then it flew the other way. Okay. But in any case, the first thing I saw about that was that fabric actually grew from nothing to actually a real thing right while I was standing there. I was 7 at the time. And it didn't go out of my mind. So in a few days, we left there. We went back to the Boston area. And the first thing I said to my father was, "You have to build me a weaving loom."
And he did?
Yes, just a small frame loom. I
Sure.
still have it.
That's great.
I still, yeah. So, so that was the beginning, and you follow through on something like that because having the dollhouse, and it was a big dollhouse. I was able to weave carpets for it and little things for the beds and stuff like that.
Right.
So, so it went on. One thing that happened was in the 3rd grade, one of the girls my own age said to me that when school was over, I should go with her on the bus and go to her house and we could play together in the afternoon. So I did. And then I realized I didn't know where my mother was and nobody else did and stuff like that. So eventually the police found my mother or the bus and they found me and
reunited the two.
Yeah. And it was a place with an outdoor bathroom with a window shade covering, no privacy, nothing. And it was my first experience at seeing anything like that.
Yeah.
Boston. Yeah. So so that was something that I never forgot because it was like the first time you were really separated and you didn't know how to find your way back.
Right.
Yeah. Well, something that I will say that with my current age, I still haven't figured out a lot of things. I don't give myself a lot longer, so there may be things I will die without ever understanding. And one of the things was my mother had certain abilities, and I never really understood where they came from.
Mm.
But she said to my father before they got married, his name was Clarence, but she called him Claire. Claire, we have to buy a house before we get married. So, as I said, he was very good natured. So they bought a house. At one point, even, and that was before I was born, the house was broken into. And one of the policemen said to my mother, Mrs. Richmond, aren't you ashamed by not having any jewelry to steal? You know? And my mother said, no, the jewelry was not her thing. Anyway, the house was just great. It was a small house on a corner. And it was a Dutch colonial. There were 4 houses on the block, 3 of them apartments, and ours was the corner. Figure, if you can, I don't understand how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And people used to come to the mailbox because if you looked at topographically, it was kind of the bottom of this downslope.
Okay.
And across the street was the back door, effectively, of a church. On the next street was a streetcar track. So the church and its playground in back. And in that playground, a corner of the playground, was the nun's house. So in 1937, there was a big hurricane that hit Boston, and it hit Chelsea. And so when my father came home, got off the streetcar and came onto our block, he saw the nuns standing out in the house and praying because the storm was there. So he went and talked to them, and that was the beginning. That was the beginning of this get together. So they spotted the fact that he walked by at a certain time. My father was punctual,
Uh-huh.
So they would stand out just to see him, and then he would doff his hat and stuff. So it got a little more and a little more and a little more. Eventually, they started using the mailbox, which was across the street on our corner. And so my mother, who was out gardening with the azaleas and stuff, small house, tiny yard, and she saw them at the mailbox, and they said hello, and she said hello. And I don't know whether it's legal or not, but I think because they came in a pair, that she was allowed to invite them in.
Mm.
So she invited them in, and they got friendly with my dolls.
Okay.
So I had an aunt who sewed really beautifully. And she gave me pattern books of the current fashions. And I saw the picture and I would make a pattern and loosely. So I brought the dolls down from my playroom to see the nuns. And they took their clothes home and stitched them on the sewing machines.
Oh. A collaboration with the
Yeah,
nuns.
so it was a very pleasant. Environment.
Did your mother work as a lawyer?
Well, my mother worked for a time. My father sent my mother to law school.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, but she enjoyed. She and Pearl worked in the house as if it were like a model something or other. I mean, they took furniture out and beat the stuffing out of it. Okay, and they cooked together. They stripped the beds every single morning because there was something romantic in the air. Everything had to smell a certain way. So when my father went in the army, of course, she took over his practice and stuff like that.
Okay.
But she didn't want to do that, basically. She wanted to be able to have evening conversations with him about the law, which was why she, in her own mind, went to law school.
Interesting.
So they did. And she and Pearl taught me how to cook.
And Pearl was like a housekeeper in your household?
Yes. But we didn't have a big enough house for her to live in. She had a very small child at home. And one of the things that was really strange is that my mother had some kind of mental contact with Pearl, because one of the days she felt something was not right at Pearl's house, and she absolutely sent her home, and it was like almost a disaster, because her very young child was on the windowsill and had opened the window.
Oh my God.
And I don't understand that. Things like that, we don't understand. But we like to talk about them with people who think that those things are real. Yeah, you understand. So, it was a fun house to live in, despite the fact I was an only child, because in every one of the houses, the three others and me, there was a child of the same age. I was July, and they were April or May.
Right. So you had a whole cohort.
Crazy, huh?
Yeah, nice.
So, like the last one of them, I signed off on last year, because she was went to live with the daughter and was no longer coherent. So that was quite remarkable. And she did, this girl who just, she did a wonderful thing. I don't, I'm going to ask if you remember something. Say whatever you want. Do you remember when the Dionne quintuplets were born?
No, but you mentioned this to me
I think it was 32. I'm not sure. I looked it up, and I'm not sure that they were right.
Okay.
Because I couldn't remember accurately. If I find something that I don't remember accurately, I like to say it's wrong. I have
the sources are wrong.
I have the ability to say it's wrong.
There you go.
Okay. Anyway, this girl whom I'm just talking about, she lived in the other corner, and she had she had two brothers and a sister. I was an only child, and she I guess that was the time. That 2 years, we were both born in 30, so 2 years, if it's true, the Dionne quintuplets were born, and they were made a big drama. So it could have been a couple of years after that, at least one, that the family started into publicity and a lot of commerciality around the Dionne quintuplets. So it turned out that one of the projects that they had there was a reproduction of 5 babies, okay, as dolls. So my friend was given the 5 Dionne quintuplets. And do you know what she did?
No.
She gave me 2. So it was so touching, because that was our bond.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the end. So I prized them. And even the nuns sewed clothes for them.
Okay.
Yeah. In recent memory, I had a friend visiting, and I told her about the Dionne quintuplets. How it was so wonderful to have a friend at that age, because we were like 4 at the time we got them. And she said, well, how wonderful. She said, but I bet you don't have those now. So I just stood up next to her. I walked into the downstairs bedroom, opened the closet door, reached into a box, and this was down at the bottom, pulled out the 2 Dionne quintuplets.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, because you understand when I think when you're in only child, a lot of things that are really emotional attachments,
Mm-hmm.
like lifelong feelings.
I can understand it.
Yeah, so people I know, all around the country, we can't get together anymore. I ruptured my ears in 68, 69, and when I got Nita, I said, and the reason that I kept her as a person is because she was honest. I said, you're going to have to fly all over the world for me and spread the gospel. And she did. Yeah. So that's what happened with the dolls. I kept them because they were an attachment.
Well, Jan, we talked a little bit about how you started to develop this passion for weaving and textiles from a
Ah,
very young age. Um, I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about how that interest progressed, maybe through your high
yes,
school years.
yes. I discovered in the Boston area that there was a significant Weavers Guild,
Hmm.
and I joined the Weavers Guild. And what was exciting about that is that they were all skilled. They fell into two categories: those people who were committed to hand weaving, and those people who became designers in the industry as well.
Okay.
Okay. So um, that was a turning point because it hadn't occurred to me that this was going to be anything outside of what I was interested in. So I kept it on the side because I was still at home, and I began to associate with some of these people who were different. And then I discovered that their concept of design was like blocked at some point
Hmm.
because they couldn't execute. In other words, they had, I don't know whether you even know the name Nels Nemirovsky, but she was a big rug designer in the industry. And it took something to break people's attachment to the existing looms. And when I went down south to walk the floors where there were hundreds of looms, I really, in high heels, that was the end of my feet. I was crippled for weeks.
Uh,
But I transferred my feelings at that stage from hand weaving to commercial weaving.
Back in the Boston Weaving Guild.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, because I by that time I had. Do you know the building 100 Memorial Drive?
I
And right,
don't,
it's
but I know
Part of the MIT campus.
Okay.
Really,
Okay.
we think of it that way. Maybe not even now, but it was Mutual Life Insurance
Okay.
Company. Um, and instead of a doorman, they had an official man sitting at a desk. So you had to open your own door, but he could tell you where to go.
This was where you were living.
Yes, in Boston,
Okay.
in the Boston area. So so I shifted my focus, and people came to me and told me, see this, see that. And one of the things that I saw was this house in Florida, the house Vizcaya.
I haven't. No, I don't
Okay,
know it.
very big, and there was a manufacturing company that had taken over weaving. I think it was 100 feet high, and very delicate fabric. Now, one of the things about fabric, because if you have ornamental fabric, not just strictly jacquard, but if you have curves,
Mm-hmm.
um, the way it's done is a lot of the threads that make up parts of the curve are not always seen. You only want some that's seen, and the rest float up behind.
Okay.
Okay, and sometimes the ones that float up behind have to be pinned so the float is not too long. It's a very elaborate procedure, and I spent a lot of time uh, in the factory, and I found it very exciting. So things were getting, you know.
So can I take you back to something that you just said a few moments ago, which was that, when you were first kind of seeing these commercial design oriented people in the textile guild, it seemed like you were saying that their design process was kind of blocked in a
Yes,
way because
yes.
of, was that because of like the limitations of the tools that they had to do the design, or
Uh,
the limitations of the looms, or
the designers did not always know the capability of the loom.
okay.
Okay, so what I was telling you about the floats and back,
Yeah.
so you looked at a perfect circle with a rose and something coming out and all of those things. A lot of designers didn't know how to do that. So even in getting in New York, and I taught for a while as an adjunct about weaving. Uh, a lot of faculty there were actually now in the industry and had completely understood. And I started there teaching them how the looms worked. And eventually, and then of course I was at IBM by this time,
Okay.
and and IBM gave them a lot of tech support.
Okay. This
And
is
and I got Nitta to head up their computer installation, and she was very generous in her uh, in her praise and her help because it was like going into a different world. You know, it was not FIT at that time was a 2-year school, and we worked like crazy there. So it eventually became a 4-year school, and they did
mm-hmm.
amazingly well, because they took over the whole notion. And so what we had, like 100 inches, 100, no, it was more than 100. I'm trying to think of Vizcaya. It was a gigantic building, and they had some gigantic windows, so it was thousands of cards that went into the production. Um, and it executed wonderfully. I mean, it was scary. It was scary. Meanwhile, we were functioning at a warehouse in Fishkill, trying to get things ready. And Fishkill is like a never, never. Do you know about Fishkill?
I mean, I've been through Fishkill,
Okay.
but
Uh, you have to have guts. You have to have guts because we stayed there for months. And a lot of the time we had was just nighttime to run the machines. And I had so many holes in my shoes that I had the soles of my shoes going around, and that when I climb up on the gantry to check things and make sure that things were in place, that they cut out. Those were the days of the 80 column card.
yes.
They cut out cards to fit my shoes,
To
so that I
resole
could
your
keep
shoes.
walking. Don't stop now.
Now, this was in the
Don't.
preparation of that automatic loom,
Yeah,
the computer controlled
yeah.
loom. Wow.
Well, this was just before the patent. I don't think the patent had yet been issued, but it was already blessed.
Mm,
Okay, so we were getting ready, and San Antonio, the hemisphere, had
yes.
already been approved for San Antonio. And another thing, funny about IBM, of course, they were thrilled to have a fun project. They didn't consider it fun, but some people did, because there were people there who would go and have a drinking party every weekend at the hotel. It was a very good situation. Um, they decided to build a pavilion strictly for the loom. The whole pavilion. They had two pavilions there. I had my own pavilion. So they said to me, apologetically, I'm sorry, but we don't know enough about the textile industry. Would you design a history wall?
Okay.
Okay, so I did. And stupid me, I mean, I never took pictures or anything.
Mm.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, confirm my stupidity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just sharing your regret.
I
I'm
have it.
sharing
I
your
have it
regret.
in practically every endeavor I've built. Stupidity, really. I don't kid. I mean, I'm lucky to get out with my breath and talk. Yeah. So when I was down there, it was really exciting, and I took a friend. I took a friend from school, but she wasn't as good as Nitta. She didn't like. She was asked one time when she had to go to England for me because I couldn't fly. I had already ruptured my drums. They asked her, "Could you do this process with knitting?"
Mm.
And she said no. But of course, Nitta, who got there and said there. Right. So San Antonio was really fun, but one night my mother came down to see it, and she was so excited. I mean, you can imagine a parent with something like this
Sure.
coming this many years later. But that night we went down to, I think it was Houston, part of the Army installation, and that was the night that Martin Luther King died, got shot. And the waiter came over to our table and said, "You killed our leader."
Mm.
So we were really shot. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I can't
It
imagine.
was a big difference.
Yeah, it must have been terrible.
San Antonio was lovely, and it was fun and everything, and it was beautiful. It, see, sometimes in my mind, I don't see the entire architecture of a city at levels. But when we would go out of our hotel, we could take a walk and we could go down like several floor levels down to a river.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
Yeah. I didn't see the whole thing in my mind because it was fast. I mean, we were always being up, down, up, down.
Well,
So that was the hemisphere. Um, I thought, and I guess that the patent. So when I got back, Nitta had been interviewed, and they showed her to me, and I said, "Well, what am I supposed to say?" They said, "Do you want her to work for you?" And so I said, "Well, let me talk to her." And she showed me about a problem she was having. She said, "But I know what the problem is, so I can fix it." Right. So I said, let me think about it for a minute. And I knew what it was. Now, she was very good. She understood certain things that I didn't understand. I mean, she understood how all the registers on the computer were designed and why they chose this and why they chose that. I did not understand that. I didn't care. Ultimately, I did. But then I didn't care. But I told her, because she was so positive and she knew, I had a stone wall. So I said to her, "I think I know what the problem is. I'm not sure. How about this? Loser buys dinner." So she said, "Yeah, sure." She was a good sport. So she did, and I won. She lost. She bought dinner, and we became friends because she was very generous with dinner. And I learned something, and I said, "Do it, do it. Leave me alone." Yeah, she was very good, and I I don't know what the timing is exactly because I had really damaged my ears by going out to California and going to a restaurant the next morning, and the restaurant was cold, and I had washed my hair.
And you got a terrible cold.
I got sick. I stuck it out, and they gave me a drug to take on the airplane, but they gave me the wrong drug at the wrong time, and my head blew open,
Ugh.
and that was it.
Well, if I could, I'm sorry about that. I would love to go like back and ask you a couple questions about sort of the origins of the textile graphics work, if I could.
Sure.
Now, as
And you can tell me exactly, what areas you were interested in.
well, what I would be as I understand it, when you came to IBM in New York City,
Right.
now was the group was kind of your job to find new applications for computing?
Not clear. Um, IBM had just migrated its local office from White Plains, New York, into Manhattan, into the Time Life building, and things were in disarray. So we kind of reported to certain people. I reported to a guy who was nasty. So I decided I was going to kind of wait and take a look. But I joined the New York Weavers Guild.
Mm-hmm.
And there I met a lot of people, and that's how I got to FIT,
Okay.
from the New York Weavers Guild. And the New York Weavers Guild had a lot of faculty in it.
Right.
Okay.
And did it also have a lot of these commercial designers within the
Yes.
guild? Okay.
Well, that was faculty.
Ah,
Okay. In other words, their love was producing something, and they had enough experience in touching industry to know when they went into the classroom that it was a different scenario than other people just learning.
right.
It wasn't just learning. They found out, every little difference, because sometimes a thread, in a particular position will cause like an almost infinitesimal spot, but the precision that you have to use in order to bury all those things, that's a big deal.
Right.
And they understood that. The faculty was incredible. I mean, they're really great people in the industry who came out. Of course, what happened finally, the machines finally moved to Japan and so forth. But FIT kept on functioning because they got the spirit. And Nitta and I both were friendly with Shirley Goodman, who was the head. I guess she was either vice president or actually head of FIT. Excuse me. And she was thrilled with being associated with us because we had a lot of external contacts as well,
Right.
and we shared them with her. And so that's what got FIT boosted up to a 4-year college.
Interesting.
And she was excited about that.
Now, did you could you talk about having the basic idea that you could use computers to kind of for textile design and automating the production?
Yes, absolutely.
How did that
I got
kind
that
of
right away.
Okay.
Right away.
Could you talk about that?
Because as I told you, that for some reason music and technology and computers were in Harvard Square, like, whoa. So I had this. In fact, there's something upstairs, and I'm sorry if I find it, I'll get it to you. I saw that what you could do was incredible. There was no available path, so that was what had to be worked out. But the fact that a course in math, which allowed you to process matrices, was directly related to the fabric cross sections on a jacquard loom.
Oh, okay. So that was the key connection.
So that was my first insight.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I went to the head of patent operations in IBM, you know, and I said, I have a good idea and I think you should patent it. And he said, we don't do that. So I went to another guy, Eugene Fubini, who had been president of Airborne Instruments Laboratory. And he had had some idea at one time of connecting machines he was involved with to computers and stuff. So I thought he would be a good idea. Let me make an appointment. So my manager, Sam Matza, set up an appointment. And he had one of these big easel pads, and it went in a gun case. You know what I'm you've seen those big round black gun cases
Okay,
like that?
yeah.
I said, Sam, no gun case and no easel pad. And if you put that, you go into any manager's office, and the first thing they do is they take your pad and put it on their easel. No easel. Okay. So he said, all right. So I sat down at Fubini's desk, and he asked me a few questions, and he said, yes, yes, yes. And I told him, and he got up, he came around the desk, he gave me a hug. He said, we're on, because he had not been able to get Airborne to do it because it wasn't sexy enough. You know, they were looking for something. So he joined IBM. And the thing that touched me was, after his death many years later, his son wrote a book about him, because I felt, because it was a very nice book, I felt that his son wanted to give him the credit that he didn't really get, and he wanted to memorialize that in the book. So it was a very gentle, nice wrap up.
So had you, I mean, you know, what was how specific was the idea that you were presenting to be patentable? Was it
Always,
broadly?
always,
Was
from day one.
Was it very specific, or was it like the broad use of computers for designing and creating textiles? Or
Well, you
was
didn't
it
need the
more...
broad use of computers.
Okay.
Because a textile is a computer. It's a graph.
Interesting.
Okay. So it was right there. It was right there in the hand. No leap.
Right. It was a mathematical object,
Absolutely.
if you will.
Absolutely.
Huh. So that mathematical connection is there.
Yes, and the thing was, I was born to it, I guess, because after seeing a loom, and just the fact that this thing kept going, kept growing and growing, it was, you know, it was too much for a 7-year-old.
Right.
But as I went on, and I saw the Reavers Guild, and I saw this, and I saw that, I mean, it just absolutely, it was all in your hand. There was nothing missing.
And so you had, you had made that connection between, matrix mathematics and textiles before, and was it, and then when you're in New York in, I guess, like the 64, 65 time frame, is that when you went around and did this kind of survey of the textile industry to...
Yeah, I went to a lot of different manufacturing facilities, but it was secure. I worked with a lace manufacturer in New York, because I worked for knitting manufacturers. Okay. I went to all the different ones, and I personally sat and did the point paper for all of these to get the feeling of the conversion.
So you were designing things in their typical way to see how that could relate to the computer.
First of all, there are tricks to the trade to hide things and to make things more structurally sound.
Right.
But just to see like a design become a fabric in a different medium was very important.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be involved in every single bit. I mean, like they're saying now about Trump, never let any, never watched every single mark on the paper. I did
Okay.
it. Yeah, it was very exciting. I made a lot of nice friends, a lot of good people, a lot of just riding above a certain level, where you could see the ground below.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy.
How important was the aspect of computer graphics to the textile graphics
Well, that's
system?
very interesting because my manager, Sam Matza, called my book and the project and everything Textile Graphics. And it's heavily involved. If you see some of the stuff I'm doing now, it hasn't stopped. It's just a continuation. Because the loom, if you have a digit with 8 positions or three positions for a 9-digit number, it's all in one cell after another. So I guess maybe what you're asking, and maybe what I agree to, and maybe the whole thing is there is such a match between textiles and computers that what idiot didn't come along before and actually execute it? It could have happened before.
Well, yeah. I mean, there is that aspect, but what's interesting to me is it seems like, you could conceive, let's say, of somebody using, punched cards
Right.
to do textile design and,
Absolutely.
but it seems like the timing of your system was around where like the first of these, kind of decent graphical terminals for the IBM machines were becoming available.
Well,
The light pen.
that began with the automobile engine. Okay, when IBM first released their 2250 and stuff like that,
Yeah.
that was for automobile design.
Right.
So that's a totally different idea. There was no match there really.
Mm.
There was a power thing, and it appealed to a certain group of people. But if you take a look at a textile, it's in front of your eyes.
Right.
So thank you for pointing that out. I don't know that I had that idea at all. It was just that I was a textile person, just from the love of textiles.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think of it, I mean, how many steps are there from a textile to a computer?
Right. Yeah.
So let us say this. It was meant to be, and I did it to get out of the way of people who had forced me to do something I hated. Okay? Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. But you know what you know what we're talking about. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so would you say that you kept with, for the sweep of would you say that you kept with the textile graphics work as the focus of your work at IBM until like
Yes.
the mid 70s or?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
So a
Exactly.
good 10,
Right.
11 years.
And I still do it because what happened was when digital computers became available to the public,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I left IBM right away because I wanted my own. So so that's a very important step technologically that happened, and now I still do the same thing because the graphics market, which focused so much on commerciality and advertising and stuff like that with graphics, left behind so much elegance. Well, I see two or more things coming together graphically, and we have the tools in the computers to do wonderful stuff with it.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing's changed. Nothing. Absolutely. It's all the same.
Well, so for that period of time, like from 75 to 85, when you retired from IBM,
Right.
um, it, from what I could, from the reading I did, it seems like in that 75 to 85 period that you were really working on, it seemed like almost like software engineering
Sure.
projects. Yeah, could you
Sure.
and about kind of new tools for people to
Yeah.
program
But
with
well,
and stuff?
it's all the same thing in a way.
Hmm.
It's all the same thing because eventually get to the point where there's a lot more power available to you,
Yeah.
and so you move into another echelon. And the industry itself changed in the sense, they broke up IBM into certain categories, and so they had to divest themselves of stuff. And when I got out into the open market, the computers that were there were of a more sophisticated nature than IBM was making.
Mm.
There was no IBM in that market. So I latched onto that. And I think it, I don't know how many people, you stay on one path and you keep going. Well, you don't stand still.
Right.
Uh, and maybe some people would like to break off and look at something else. Well, I didn't want to because there was something so constant in all of that. The thread of it was incredible.
Is part of that thread design, like, so let's say in, so much about the textile graphics work, we'll just say, from the 60s to 75 is
Right.
about, you know, um, sort of tools for people to do design and implement designs, for textiles. And
Yeah.
then it seems almost like that design theme carries through to that next period from 75 to 85 where it's like tools for people to design software. Is that, am I reading too much into things, or
Well,
is that there?
computers got really overloaded in a sense. I mean, um, if you went out to California and stuff, you'd see people working in areas that you never thought were substantial to work in. But I always felt like the MIT focus and the California focus were very different.
Mm.
I loved the MIT focus. So I stuck to expanding. Like I have a book next door. You said about Amherst. Well, I can't think of his name right now, but he was at the project at Amherst that had the central focus of actually causing computer confusion. Okay, there was a lot of stuff that just kind of overlapped, and they spread it all out. So there was a difference. I forget the name of the guy from Pennsylvania who took the staircase at MIT and decided to give someone a lecture because they were doing things so bad. He pogoed down the staircase, and as he began to get down, the next step required him to bounce up. So he almost got to the point where bouncing down the stairs caused him to hit his head on the ceiling, and he turned around and pogoed back up the staircase. And he had that as an example of what is going on in the computer industry at the then current time.
Okay.
So there was a lot happening. I think we've experienced jumps. Like, take AI today. It's probably like what I said earlier about about limitations. I think that we don't quite understand AI, but every single company is in on it now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's very scary, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, so I think that, now we're going to put people in outer space. And like I said before about closing the gap with the position of limitations. Okay, if you live in an environment without any limitations, then what I said before about knowing knowing what is reasonable is valid.
Mm-hmm.
But if you now think of the whole universe, there's no such thing as freedom. Okay, so I think what you're talking about is really, we've come to a new plateau. The AI is a new plateau. I don't know that I have any feeling about it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I have friends who are in it. Really,
Yeah.
really in it. So I can't shift now. But I think that MIT is going to have a completely different orientation than California.
And what do you think is behind that distinction?
The difference?
Yeah.
Personality, climate, and everything. MIT has always had a certain kind of, now I wouldn't say elegance. I don't know how to describe it. I'll give it some thought and come back to you later with it. But California has a different mood. They had a professor at MIT who, and I was living at 100 Memorial Drive, the big, and so he let me use his office to practice in at night, practice my clarinet, because I couldn't do it at 100 Memorial Drive. Too many, and temperament vastly different. MIT versus California, and I think you can read about that. That's not my idea.
Sure.
I think you can read about those two things, and it makes sense. It makes sense. I think climate's a big. Don't you think so?
I agree. Yeah. Cultural climate, physical climate. The whole thing.
And I had, and this professor Morton Wertley, he. I won't tell you this particular story, but I'll tell you later. I said to him at one point, find me a summer job. And so he went to the head of the library, because 100 Memorial Drive was right next to the MIT library.
Okay.
And he came back with some strange remark that that there was something going on between me and this professor who let me use his office, and I didn't get a space, but it was something to laugh at.
Yeah.
But so the whole point was MIT was very rib-rocked, stable, and if you went into the lobby, you didn't have to either curtsy or do something. But it was one of those, yeah. So I think one of the things you're saying is that the textile has a different relationship to the computer than almost any industry we can look at.
That's interesting. Just because of the nature of the patterning, how the things are produced.
I think it's an automatic. I think I was just around to grab it. I'm not sure, I did anything special. I just,
Well, you were an inhabitant
it
of
belonged to me. It belonged to my,
both
it
worlds,
was
right?
part of my life. Yeah, right.
You had the computer part of
Yes.
your life, and you had the
Yeah,
textile part of your life, so you
right.
could see.
Yeah. You pushed me to, uh, you pushed me to say, so what happened? how, how? Yeah. It's funny. I didn't, it didn't occur to me. And, but lately, I've had a really strange feeling because I've been working with Tufts and they have never understood what I do.
Hmm.
They would like my money.
What do
And they're nice. Okay,
yeah,
that's fine.
yeah.
But they have never appreciated that what I was doing with the textiles was significant in the world.
Hmm.
Because it's changed a heck of a lot of things because a lot of stuff was tangential to textiles.
What was tangential to textiles?
Textiles.
Oh.
Textiles had computer stuff that was not pure textile, but
Right. Okay.
offshoots. Yeah. And the whole idea of a separate head that is lifting threads, instead of that loom that I saw as a 7-year-old child, it's not very far apart.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost, yeah.
Let's just say I fell into this mess.
And be done with
I,
it. Yeah.
I fell into it and decided to make it my own. And
Yeah.
that's it.
Well,
You would like to know something?
yes, I would actually. It's a surprise, surprise. I have a question. I wanted to go back a little bit from the time period that we were just talking about to
Sure.
talk about your involvement with music and how that involvement with music led you
Right.
to have a connection to computers.
Okay.
So if you could just talk about how you first became involved with music at
Well,
all.
let's say the first was the experience of the husband playing the oboe and the wife with the clarinet and elbowing each other. And that took me headlong into Harvard Square in a music group. And those groups were a harpsichordist, for example, who finally said to me, listen, I could use you at MIT because I'm doing such and such and I need some processing. And I didn't know anything about a computer. I said, sure. Like you said to me, we understand that word. We do it all the time. So I said, sure. And he showed me, and I got linked at MIT. And I spent a lot of time looking at the machine I was doing stuff for and asking questions about it. And the guy there who was the head of it died recently at MIT in New York. But we became friendly with him at Copley. And so I met somebody there and we started playing music in coffee houses. He was an MIT professor and he decided that we could do that and have fun. So we did. So all of those, I guess it's always the question of people. Okay, sometimes you find someone that you click with. So, and the technological time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time when everything in Harvard Square was just popping,
Right.
And even Sprague, who I spoke about, he had a Franklin car, and his cylinders were always going hoo-ha. So he had someone building new cylinders for his car. I can imagine that in today's environment. I mean, can you imagine what it took in that environment with something that you would expect someone to be almost able to do today?
Right.
Okay? He had them built if one of them failed. Okay? He had a place up here. I haven't kept track now of his children, but his wife and I were buddies. And he had a large, it's in the northwest the northeast part of Vermont. He had a lot of land, and he built railroad tracks for a set of toy trains, but they're big enough for his grandchildren to ride on top of and go around the whole property. Okay, so I add that to you for all these things that happen, because that's one of them that happened just because he kept telling us to shut up.
So it was really, I mean, it sounded to me from our previous discussions like, you know, going to music school, right? Which and the school was it in Harvard Square or it was in
Yes, it's
Cambridge?
called the Laundry School of Music, and my high school friend, whose trumpet teacher played with the Boston Symphony, also taught at the Laundry School. And so I learned from her to go there, and I went there during my last 2 years at high school. So that when time came for me to go to Tufts, I went to the dean and I said, well, I hadn't even had my 16th birthday yet. I said, I would like to postpone admission for a year. And she said, okay. And then I postponed it for another year. So in those 2 years, I spent in Harvard Square.
Mm.
Okay. And that enabled a lot more of music association. Now, the guy at MIT who told me, I need you to help me processing all this stuff, he was a harpsichordist. And I have a wonderful picture of him. If I can find it, I'll show you, because I just went through some and I couldn't, I keep trying to neaten things up and I don't get anywhere. So things like that just kept happening.
And that brought you into connection
music and textiles, because of my dealing with my own devices. Trying to think of, well, I was active in the formation of the music group at the Boston Museum, Fine Arts Museum. And it's crazy because some of the things had to do with photography. I may be able to show you one. So it didn't make any difference. So many things were just pouring out that you didn't know when you went somewhere whether you were going to have this topic, that topic, or any other topic. It was just a kind of explosion. I don't know whether that was Harvard Square per se, or whether it was a time.
Mm-hmm. Probably both.
I think you're probably right, because people were afraid of a lot of things. There was so much going on that people didn't quite understand what they were getting into. Like, you'd be invited to something, you didn't know what it was. You didn't know what idea was behind it. But the interesting thing about Sprague was, he was full professor at Harvard in physics with the Franklins and so forth, and the trains running through the thing. And so he had the play notion of the trains. But when his wife and I were talking together like this, he was still shut up. And I mean, really, this was not humor with him.
Okay,
it was for real. So that made us laugh even more.
Now, some of the things that you were connected with through the music community were, I mean, one of the computer projects was related to the Whirlwind computer at MIT. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were there other computing connections into like the computing
at
center
MIT?
At MIT, yeah.
Yes, because the Professor Morton Mortley, who allowed me to use his office at night, and that was right next door to my apartment building. I would go over, and like one night I heard someone else practicing. So I was ready for a break. I had a music stand for the clarinet. I put it down and I got up and I walked out into the corridor and I found the other room and I knocked on the door and I went in. But I was wrong. It wasn't a person practicing a musical instrument. It was a computer playing music.
Really?
Yeah. So I got involved.
What was that? So what was happening there?
Well, you see, here we go again. And now you and I have hit something because what we're saying now is the notes. The notes were the same thing as the threads and the fabric.
Hmm.
Okay. They had a definite one-to-one relationship with an attribute within the music, within the computer itself.
Hmm.
And it was a natural.
Hmm.
So, so this professor and I, he was just the generosity of his saying, "Use my office." He, and I can show it to you. He went down to Princeton to spend a year figuring out what it was I said I had to do because I was unable to go away. I had to stay in that area. So he went down, took the job on behalf of us, and eventually it wound up. There's a book on my coffee table next door in which it talks about the fact that the relationship, well, I guess the guy who wrote this book was actually primarily at Princeton, took a year to come to what did I say this college?
MIT.
Amherst.
Oh, okay.
Took a year to come to a year at Amherst, and he definitely knew that the connection between computers and textiles and design per se was the whole smasheroo. He was one of those. So it's the footnote which tells the whole story of the business of this project.
Okay.
Okay, I'll get it for you because it's kind of fun, but it just shows that that was it. And I think he blocked. I think part of the article was he blocked one. I think he blocked the Britannica from advancing the article. Something crazy.
Huh.
But but so here we go again. So let's say that the keys in music are representative of a similar kind of phenomenon that the threads and their interlacings are. And then if you consider the musical notes and you consider the kind of interrelationships that a single composition brings to your ears, you understand the relationships between textiles and composition. And that goes back to the very first college lecture I heard, in which this professor said that the rusts, I think I mentioned this to you, the rusts in music are as important as the notes. Because now we're talking about architecture, and here we have two media. We have music and we have textiles. And you and I could go and, yes, more.
Interesting.
Okay.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, was it so how I mean, so at this time when you're involved in this music scene, a classical music scene, if I could call it that, and getting introduced to these, working with computers, getting exposed to
Right,
computers.
and I played in the camaraderie of the Museum of Fine Arts, so that was part of it.
Period.
Yep.
Now at this same time period, IBM has opened up their Cambridge Research Center.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So how does that connection come from you to that center?
I joined that. I joined that by virtue of my contacts, and it was a very interesting place. It was very exciting, and they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what they were doing because they had salesmen on commission, and all of a sudden they birthed a new computer, and so the salesmen were forced to deliver like 7 computers to one manufacturer of something. And so the salesman's commission was so gigantic that they became millionaires and left the company right away.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that was part of that game, and the guy I worked was a really he took. I said something funny in a note that I put up on the wall. I don't even remember what it was, but he took it down and wrote a memo about why I should not be allowed to do certain things. I mean, you know, I never had a parent like that, so I didn't have anything to compare it to. But when I told someone, they said, "Well, if you get to different personality levels in different businesses and stuff, that you get to figure out sometime why particular personalities love to stay in a particular kind of company,
Mm.
because some of them are really smart, but they can't break out.
Hmm.
And I don't understand that, but you'll understand it.
Well, I'm
You
not
will.
sure.
I know you will. No, you will.
Well, so did you, through your connections in the music community, is that how you first got connected to IBM and came to join
Uh,
them?
got connected to IBM because I was in Harvard Square. I met a guy who was a harpsichordist. He got me to handle his data in graphics, and
Who was that? Do you remember?
and he was a scientist, and we went to what's the school in Vermont? I can't think of the name of it now, but it's a very open school where we slept under the trees.
Marlborough College? No.
No, I can't. It's like Pulteney. It's like, I think it's got a P in it. I'll
Putney School? No.
no, but
I don't know. I'm
it's in the
sorry. I'll
middle of the
stop.
state,
Yeah.
and all of these little things began to point the way. First of all, I had an innate love of textile from childhood, and I had a practice in music, and I had a whatever, and somehow all the things came together. But one of the things you're saying is these things didn't have to come together. They were all together anyway in life.
Hmm.
All of these pieces are part.
Right.
Even like this, like professor, like Sperry Coolidge. He played the violin, he played the viola, and he played the oboe. Okay. And he had all the connections to the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And he actually finally moved his mother out into a hotel, okay, who had sponsored all of these composers. Um, but when things like that happen, they pop. You're not traveling and encountering the next one. It's not like that. It's everything together,
Mm-hmm.
all at once.
I understand.
Yeah, and that's what Harvard Square was. There's anyone that you'd run into, there was something to talk about. I just fill in the blank.
Well, it seemed that once you took that job with IBM at the
Right.
Cambridge Research Center, I mean, that you
Oh,
were.
it was a leap. Of course, the IBM interview the interviewer came to see me.
Okay.
Okay, and he said, "We invented." I'm not sure what name they were using at the time, but it was the main computer at MIT. He said, "We invented that." I said, "Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, of course they didn't, but it was okay. He knew that. And I had to make up my mind. Now, here's someone who's really serious on the other hand,
Yeah.
but I went along with that. So I accepted a job. And I didn't really like it because we were all in a bullpen, and they were all sticklers, like punch your time card if you were 3 minutes late. They send you a letter. I don't even know whether I still have a letter. I mean, we have noticed that,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, it was really funny. So I made up my mind, I made up my mind that I would do something drastic. I would do something drastic to these people. I mean, that was a job, to remind people that they had to punch the time clock at a certain time. And if you went out beyond the 15-minute window,
So what was your reaction to that sort of very
well,
constraining environment?
I found friends,
Mm-hmm.
and then they said, "Come work for me." You
Right.
know, I didn't think that I was that smart because I didn't know that much. But if I liked somebody and they seemed to know what they were doing, I was willing to join and learn it and
Mm-hmm.
find out about it. And so there were new languages being developed at MIT all the time. There was a lot of stuff, and forget the traveling salesman who used to come in and tell you about all the money they made because they sold so many. Forget that. Um, I I don't know how I flourished. I sort of liked all the ideas that were around. I mean, things just seem to come, you know, you open your eyes and there's something that you hadn't thought of before, and wow.
Well, it seemed like so much was open at that
Yeah.
time frame, and it seemed like you had
Yes.
the opportunity to really get into some like software questions or problems that were very it if my reading is correct, very general about things like scheduling and
Absolute.
very
Yes.
kind of foundational
Always.
issues.
Always. Well, because those were the days when I was there of the first operating system.
Right.
Okay. So it was a very exciting time.
And so how long was it that you worked there before you made the move to New York? Was it
Not long,
okay?
because the guy that I knew there, a friend, he took a job in New York, and I think he said, come work for me,
Mm.
and I did. And you've seen my IBM ad,
Yes. Yeah.
so he was the one who had that done.
Okay.
Okay, so he was the motivation. He was a good friend.
What was it like for just in terms of being a woman in that environment? Were there other women in
Tons.
tons?
Yeah, not only that, but they were all musicians.
Really?
Yes, that's what I started to say in the very beginning. IBM had this notion. I don't know where they got it. And I don't know whether they wanted to sustain it or it just kind of accumulated. But I remember there was one of them who used to answer the phone, and I forget exactly how she said it. She said, "But don't consider leaving a message as fulfilling the capability of accomplishing this call." You know, you know what I mean? It was a
Very
real one.
arch. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Jean something. Jean Sammet.
Oh, yeah,
You
of
know her
course.
name?
Of course I know Jean Sammet's name. She
See?
was in that office?
Yeah. Well, she was in the office I went to when I got to New York.
Okay. Wow. All right.
See?
Yeah.
Now you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Some very
Yeah.
high-powered characters. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
All these things come back to you after 75 years.
Yeah. Oh, that's really fascinating. Well, I wanted to maybe shift gears a little bit to talk to you about, you know, your decision to leave IBM in '85.
Right.
And how your kind of artistic practices had developed then, because I know in the let's say in the later 60s, you were like exhibiting
Right,
textiles that you
right,
had made.
right.
So, how was your artistic practice
Oh,
shifting?
well, so the reason I left
Yeah.
was because mini computers became available. So that was very exciting. And I spent a lot of time developing software. And I did several shows in different places. Like, for example, I was still connected to IBM in an emotional way because I had friends.
Sure.
So some shows took place in IBM environments, or in the Boston area, or like that. Um, then I wanted to experiment with styles, so I did a lot of that, and I did some shows in New York, and I did something at FIT. The time was just ripe. I don't remember what year that was, though.
These were textile shows?
It was graphics, like a
Okay.
lot of. I love New York City architecture. Okay, I'll give you some booklets of show booklets. Um, and you have a copy of the staircase show, right? The booklet with that staircase on it.
I don't think so, but I think you
I'll
should.
give it to you because
Okay.
that's a show I did, which I consider to be a different kind of show, because it was a it was a show alternating graphics with text.
Mm,
Oh, even the text was itself a graphic, but it was photo with text, and it was a story, and it was the story of Sinclair Lewis's last interview,
mm,
and so one of the pictures in it was painted by a woman who was actually a friend of my aunt. My aunt was the town librarian in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And so this particular artist had an exhibit in the Chicago World's Fair, which is way back.
mm-hmm.
But I knew about it, and I have the painting next door. So, so that particular booklet tells the story of the aunt who made the trip to interview Sinclair Lewis, and the story of how it developed, and the friendship between her and Sinclair Lewis and some of the other people involved,
Mm,
and the text. And that's very interesting, just because if somebody is walking through a gallery and seeing it, you have to read the text and you have a whole experience versus just going by something with different graphics.
right.
So I like that, and I want to do some more of that.
When did when did you start? I mean, how did your relationship to making textiles change? Did you sort of slow down in making textiles in favor of making
No, I always do. I
graphics?
always text them. Well, you saw the tapestry hanging in next door,
Yes.
and there's another one in the city. Um, that's it's very interesting, because you can spend your whole life doing one textile,
Right.
because of the involvement.
Mm,
But I called my manager one day and I said, I have to weave in order to work for you. You have a choice. He understood. He was the one who pulled me from MIT,
okay.
and we stayed friends for lifetime. So that was the story there.
Okay.
I kept doing that all the time, and just recently, I brought that loom up here, and it's in my basement, but it's not operational because I don't have. You can't really do that and do anything on a computer at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, but it's just magical. I mean, the relationship. You know, I had I forget. I had a Bulova watch. No, Bulova clock radio.
Okay.
And I never had a watch. And my Bulova clock radio had damage, and it went to wherever they send it back in China or something. So I had no timepiece. So they used to call me from the office, "Are you coming in?" And I used to say, "Soon." But until I sat down and actually did what made me feel good, I couldn't leave. So I got 2 tapestries done while Bulova was in, I think it was either China or Japan. I'm not sure. It was a nice little clock radio. And then all of a sudden, when Apple came out with I finally got an iPhone, and then I had a timepiece. But not before then. My whole life I never had
that's very
a watch.
Nice.
But you have to have the right friends.
I guess so.
Life doesn't work unless you have the right friends. Yeah.
So at what point did you start using, for making your own art? At what you started using
I'm doing
a
it
personal
every day.
computer, but
Every day.
How did that begin? Using digital images?
I get on a different tack. Okay. I don't know. Now you turned me off, right? But I think I'm okay. Hold on. So see, for example, the U. I began to work on an alphabet. I don't even remember why. But I love alphabets.
When did you begin on this project, would you say?
I think a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is through a combination of different
digital
images and photographs.
The thing is, you don't know. Okay, you're just using it to experiment because I wanted to do, embedding as well as other things. So, so some of the backgrounds have a lot of texture because I walked around Manhattan and I found objects that provided me grounds on which to embed.
Right.
So now here is an E, and whoops. What's interesting about this is in the next room over there, there's a picture, which is part of the E. It's the whole picture. The E is part of it, and I embedded it, and I developed a technique for embedding, which is a whole bunch of different steps and stuff. And I'll tell you a little more about that. So what happens here, and we can take a look at that, is there's a part of it where there's light flashing. And I saw immediately that I don't like this spot. Okay. So I have in another image somewhere, whoops, I have in another image corrected it. So the whole thing is playing. For example, in this particular background, and all of these here come from a sculpture. You will see, if your eye sees it. If you don't, then tell me that I'm wrong, but you're seeing something else. You'll see that to the side of the E, there's almost a peach, but I think it may be a yellow or something. See to the upper?
To the upper left
Yeah,
of it?
yeah. There's a little color in there.
There is.
Yeah, and so that's good. And then within the E itself, that white flash is not good.
Mm-hmm. That
So
bright
I had to
band.
go back into the original of that picture and do a modification to create. So, so there's a.
So did your practice of taking, I mean, did you start with film photography that then
No,
you started with digital
digital
photography?
pictures.
Okay.
Right
Yeah.
away.
Okay.
Right away.
So that was when did you begin using digital photographs, would you say?
I think very, very early.
Yeah.
Very, very early. And I don't know what started it, but I know it was very exciting. I think it was. Sony came out with the first digital camera way back, a 600 resolution, 600 DPI, like almost nothing. And I latched onto it right away. So I went out with the camera. I have a walkway behind that house there where stuff was growing up, and I took a lot of shots, and I sent them to a friend over in Massachusetts, Paul Abrahams, and we went back and forth with how to develop this. And then he came and did more stuff with me, and so now this is an A that I like, and I've done a couple of A's. But the background of it is the sculpture in front of the New York Public Library on 58th Street, which is a business branch of the New York Public Library. And the scrolling on the A is actually a set of windows, brass window in a ticket window in Grand Central Station.
So you started with digital photography as soon as it became available, and
Day
then
one.
have you started? Then were you did you start using different tools to modify and work with the
Oh
digital
yeah,
images?
sure, big time.
Did you were you
Well,
Photoshop or?
there's a lot to do, and a
Mm,
lot to change, and a lot to filter, and like some things I cut holes in and put stuff inside them. Some things I put between layers. Some things I shift layers. Sometimes I eliminate layers. Yeah, a lot of a lot, and that's very exciting too. It's not clear where one goes with all of this.
mm-hmm.
That's not clear to me yet. Like I got some letters out there that I put up, and I'm playing with them to check. I made a mistake because I thought I had enough lighting. The lighting doesn't do anything. I've got to change the lighting system. But I'm trying to see whether certain things pop and come out.
Right.
Occasionally, some do really good, and some don't. So I'm trying to figure out what's what.
So at this point in time, you have been, while you were pursuing artistic pursuits while you were working for IBM,
Yeah,
in textiles and
yeah.
everything, but your career, after IBM, just solely devoted to being an artist is kind of has been as long as your
Getting an idea and
IBM
making it
career.
happen.
Yeah.
If I see something that I like, or if I see something that I want to add to something that I like, I can do it.
Right.
So I'm at the point where I don't have to ask anyone. It's a crazy point to be at. And if anyone tells you, get to the point where you have this level of independence, say something obscene.
Okay. Well, I also wanted to ask about just sort of the, about the rhythm of your life, let's say, because I know you were living in New York City, and then at some point in time you bought this. You bought a place up in Vermont, and how were
No,
you?
I built. I
You
built that.
built
I
your
built that
place,
house
yeah,
in '69.
in '69. So
I bought my co-op in New York in '68,
okay,
and I said to my father, "Dad, I'd like to borrow money from you because I want to build a house in Vermont." And he said, "Jan, you have the money." I said, "No, but I don't like to see my bank balance go down." So he loaned me the money, and I gave it back to him in 3 years. But I just didn't want to subtract that much from my bank
sure.
at one time.
I get it. Yeah.
They're right. I'm glad you got it. Yeah. So that was a story, and I built that house, and it, it's sighted so that it's drafting all up. You can open it up, and it
Uh,
wants to take off. Yeah. So yeah, and then the builder told me there was another piece of land available, so it's got another lot in back of it. So it goes all the way between the two roads,
so
Sycamore and Burwell.
would you come up here every time you had,
I came up on
vacation
weekends
and for on the
at
weekends?
that point.
Okay.
Yeah, and the only reason I'm up permanently now is is because of COVID. Okay, and I have no more friends in the city.
Mm,
I have no influence. Okay, all my friends are in different places. So I have a friend in Pennsylvania, a friend in Florida, a friend in California, and stuff like that. And we speak every day in graphically. And
right.
but I don't know. Oh, I'm going to keep the apartment because if I give it up, that'll take my time to do that.
Right.
So why should I?
Yeah. Don't waste
I
your
barely
time
have, I
getting rid
barely
of it.
have enough time to do what I want to do. Yeah. So I am pleased with coming to this point.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it seems like you're it from talking to you, it seems like you're still following this connection with computers very closely, judging from your, discussion about AI. And so and I mean, certainly in your art practice, you're using
Right.
computers all the time. So,
Yes. Yes.
is that, safe to say that you're still very engaged with computing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, there's a bunch upstairs because I can't take the fact that every few weeks they issue an amendment to the operating system. When you want to go into a room, you want to sit down, hit the toy, and get it working and do what you want to do. But of course, they have to do it to make the price reasonable. So I understand that. I get around it. That's really an obstacle
Yeah.
because they're always updating.
Right. The tool's
You know,
not stable.
so you have to keep in your mind exactly what it is they're updating, whether you can use it or not. And a lot of times you can't. So you have to, work with reality.
Yeah.
Work with reality. I think it is a great world, and we don't know where it's going now. We'll find out.
And and what's I would be interested to hear like about your thoughts about the relationship between sort of technology and art, today versus what you've seen happen over the course of your career,
What's coming?
or just where you see it today, or how in general you see the connection between technology and art,
Technology and what?
and art.
Oh, I definitely. I mean, there's a profound technology connection with art. That's the spirit of a human being is essentially an art reach and grab. So the fact that computers have come to allow you expression is a great gift,
Mm,
and you find maybe a different way than someone else finds. That's what's exciting,
right.
and it's there. It's that thing that the guy said that that it, it's it's always there blocking you in one sense because you have constraints from a mechanism. But if you can twist your head enough, you know, to use the prime thing available to you, it's very exciting. Yeah, I mean, we don't realize how fortunate we are. You know,
Mm.
it's unbelievable.
Well, I mean, I think we've covered all of the kind of main topics that I really wanted to make sure we had a chance to talk about. But I was just thinking of, what about, what do you think is are some of the most important things for people to know, or that they could learn from, your experience with this whole sweep of computing that you got involved in, and your career between art and technology? What, I don't know, I guess the question I'm struggling to ask is, like, what do you think is would be most helpful for people to understand about
Well,
what you
you have a
experienced?
fantastic set of tools out there. You know, if it's within your path to use them, and you like to make things. See, kids love to make things. I mean, you get alphabets to play with. You get things on wires to move around. That's a natural thing. So if you can take that and adapt it to every step you go along in life, you got it made. That that's it. It's if you like playing with things that are creative and and you enjoy and you discover something. There's new discovery every day. I just figured out fill in the blank.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now I think a lot of parents encourage that. That's not unusual. I mean, you see kids, even in playpens with exactly the right toys to get into and to move on.
Mm.
So if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, parents don't necessarily understand that, but that's a critical thing in life. So, this stuff isn't toys.
Right.
It's very different.
Well, thanks. Well, are there any other topics that you think we should dig into?
I have no idea because I didn't know. I didn't know what you're looking for, but I figured when you come and tell me,
Yeah,
we'll
we'll
find.
figure it out.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll give it a little thought.
I mean the whole motivation for me,
Yeah,
is that, you've had this very unique, very interesting uh kind of experience in the
yeah,
world of computing,
yes,
and I just want to have an opportunity to kind of,
yeah.
preserve some of this, and
I'll
yeah.
think of some stuff that you may be interested in. The thing is, it's very important if you find something like that you're in love with. Don't let it go.
Mm,
because it's a lifelong thing. I had an experience when I moved to New York, originally in the Time Life building, and I met a friend there, and she's still my friend. But she's had a good position out at a university in Colorado, but she didn't really love the computer. She married a guy who was a professor there, so it kept her into the area, but she didn't love it. So it resulted in nada.
Mm.
It could have been big. She's very smart. Okay, she went to Harvard. Mm. So it's temperament as well. You know, you get it a lot from your parents. You know, what they find exciting, what they teach you. You know, I mean, I think everybody has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we certainly will.
Yeah. I mean, my parents knew some things. They didn't know anything about what I know, you know, and it didn't touch them until they began to see something. But that was okay. I didn't care. I didn't care. And I have a lot of friends who, you know, did and did not. So it's kind of, my mother took me to Florida. God knows why she did it. I never asked. But my friends who were born in April and May were in the first 6 months of the year. And I was July. So when I came back from Florida in a particular year, they started school because the government said in the first 6 months of the year, it's like whatever.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was just over the line. So my mother had to go. She enrolled me in kindergarten when I got back. And I had a chair and I sat and read to the students. So I said, I want to be in the first grade. So she went to the teacher, nice. She was a teacher herself. And she explained. So I got pushed ahead. Then when we moved to Texas, we had an apartment in a duplex house. I met the other girl. She was going into the 9th grade. I was going into the 8th grade. My mother went to the teacher and said, she's met a new friend. It would be nice if we keep them together. So we let her start in the 9th grade. If there's no problem, she'll go back. So I got another one. So by the time I got out of high school, I was almost 16.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There was nothing special. My mother was just in a good mood.
Well, how are we doing on time? No, we're still good. Okay. Well, I think that's maybe all the questions I had for us to go through today, Jan. So I think.
Yeah, think of something. You're always welcome.
Okay. Yeah, I can always come back. Yeah. Yeah, but thank you very much.
Whatever
that
you
was
guys
great.
like.
Yeah, that was great. I think we're good to
try to get him
cut.
to leave his pink shirt here. It's really look at it and tell me if it isn't beautiful.
It is.
Look at
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Wait, I have a quick thought.
Yeah.
So it's kind of computer stuff and IBM.
Yeah.
Jan, tell them the train story. Tell them the train story. IBM train story.
Yes.
Yes, tell them that story.
Is that okay?
Remember the story you told me about being on the train with everybody drinking?
Oh, the ones across from me. Oh, yes. Okay. It's absolutely true. And I did tell you the good part that, you know, IBM suddenly decided that they like musicians.
Yes.
And they hired them. They just plain did it and they got good results. This is the story that IBM had a big base in Endicott.
Yes,
New York.
sure.
And so at one time we were a big meeting pulling people from all over the country. And they were leaving Endicott and going back to New York City through Albany. So they were on this big train going west to east. And Thomas Watson Sr. got on the train. and walked through the train during the transit, and he noticed that a lot of people were drinking alcohol. He fired every one of them. That's yes. And so that's yes, thank you for telling me, reminding me. Yeah, that was the story, see? And that's what I'm saying about the temperament. We're talking about a couple of different things. We're talking about how did this guy like music? What did he think that musicians had in common with computers? Of course, now you and I know it's a big deal. Okay, absolutely. We got that today.
Yeah. Well, and
We've got the notes. We got the notes and the grid of the fabric today. That's ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he absolutely fired everybody on the train who was drinking.
Wow.
Well, that's the whole thing. Can you, if you go to school and you graduate, and however old you are, you're now an adult, and some schmuck tells you, it tells you, you know, that's the end of your professional life. Get off the train.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. Yeah, absolutely. But a great story. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice that we know so much of this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.